Hello, everybody. Welcome to this new approach that we are having to life groups and to small groups. We begin with a meditation today, and I start with a quote from a movie, an Italian movie that I have personally never watched, but this quote is pretty famous. So there's this guy on the phone. He's been invited to a party with some friends, and the line on the phone, he keeps going back and forth whether he's going to go or not go. He's feeling a little bit, self-conscious, and he tends to wallow a little bit in self-pity here and there. So the quote, he's on the phone and he says, "Will they notice me more if I come and stand in a corner or if I don't come at all?" So that's a quote for you. And so when I think about that quote, it makes me think about pride. And pride that has two sides. The one that is the most obvious, and then the one that is probably a little bit more hidden. So in his case, maybe his pride that would make him think, well, I can choose not to come by embracing a sense of self-importance, maybe boasting, like they don't deserve me type of thing. Or the pride that makes us think, I will stand in a corner and sulk. Kind of like that's what self-pity is all about. So I would almost say that pride has a bright side and a dark side. Not in the sense that there is a positive side to pride, but bright in the sense of almost like the side of the moon, the one that we see more often. And then there is a darker side of pride that we rarely see. And so the first one is the most obvious one that we all kind of notice, made of arrogance and self-importance. But then there is the other one that is more the hidden type of pride that we hardly, I think, ever talk about, or I honestly hardly ever hear preached about. And so, as we say, it's easier to spot the obvious pride than to spot self-pity. And personally, I find it easier actually to deal with pride than with self-pity. Why? Well, because I think that it's easier to pull someone down who might be standing on a pedestal or on a ladder than pull someone up from a hole. That's just gravity. So it's easier to pull someone down than to pull someone up. And so it's easier, if you will, to pop a balloon than maybe to unwrinkle a shivering raisin. Okay, pardon my silly analogy, but that's what comes to mind. Or a shriveled piece of paper, right? It's easier to pop a balloon, like to deal with pride, someone that puffs themselves up, than it is to straighten out and unwrinkle something that has been closed up. Now, I think that we all struggle with pride, one way or another. So some of us might struggle more with the bright side of pride, meaning the obvious side of pride. Some of us might struggle more with that more hidden, silent type of pride that I would call self-pity. So maybe one place where we can start in our reflection is, what is my go-to type of pride? Again, assuming that all of us struggle with pride. I know for myself, it's more the boasting, the being loud and being the center of attention and cracking jokes. And so that's probably why it's easier for me to deal with that type of pride, because I know it. I know it well. Whereas I tend to struggle more in whenever I face self-pity, because I don't quite know how it works as much. I'm sure I struggle a little bit with that as well, but it's not a primary thing that I go to, whereas pride, got it down, the typical pride, if you will. So let's look at some examples in the gospel of either attitude, of the two types of pride. Again, think about pride and self-pity as being this, two sides of the same coin. So some examples of the typical pride, the more obvious pride. I think about the man, the self-righteous man who is in the temple and talks to God saying, I fast twice a day, I pay all taxes on my income, and I'm not like the guy right in the back, and he points to this man in the back that is, beating his own heart. Or the two brothers who come up to Jesus and say, listen, we want to be sitting one at your right and one at your left when you come into your kingdom. Or the young man, the young son in the parable that says, Father, give me my share of the inheritance. I'm out of here. Check it out. So these are just some examples. There's plenty of them in the gospel. Let's look at what are some examples instead of this other hidden type of pride, the self-pitying. One is the man who's laying by the pool with the 5 porticos. When Jesus approaches him and asks him, do you want to be well? It's interesting how this man responds. He says, Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the waters are stirred. So he doesn't answer, do you want to be well? He immediately blames someone else. Or Martha, who looks at Jesus and says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me here by myself to serve? Or the older son in the prodigal son story that says, Father, look, all these years I served you and never have you given me even a young goat to feast with my friends. So now let's look a little bit, how does Jesus relate to these different forms of pride? I think for one thing, he always calls people out of themselves, right-sizing their own perception of reality and reordering their perception to the only true standard, which is humility. And as most of you probably know, the word humility comes from the Latin humus, which means ground. So really, humility means to be grounded, to be placed in reality, to live and abide in reality. And by doing so, by being grounded in reality, the Lord invites us not to exaggerate our successes, and that's what pride is, and nor to exaggerate our sufferings, and that's what self-pity is, when we blow our sufferings, exaggerating them. And so Jesus tries to bring us back to reality, which is the one place of the present moment where grace abides. So grace abides in the present moment. We know that God is outside of space and time, so when God operates, he operates in an eternal present. So the only way for us to know for sure that we are abiding in grace is to live in the present moment. As we all know, the Our Father, Jesus doesn't promise bread for the next 3 months that we can put in the freezer. He says, ask the Father for your daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. So it's rooted in the today, in the here and now, in the present moment, because that's where God saves. Another quote, I have been reading this book, and my sisters laugh because I think I read it 5 or 6 times in the past 2 years. I hardly can put it down, and once I'm done, I just want to go back and start again, so I need to be temperate. So I just took the book and handed it to one of the sisters saying, okay, you read it, otherwise I'm going to go back and reread it for the 3rd time in a row. And the book is called In This House of Bread. It's a novel about following the story of a successful career woman in England. It's a novel, so it's not based on a true story, but this woman who at the height of her career leaves everything behind and enters a Benedictine monastery. And it's an amazing book. If you have a chance to read it, it's called In This House of Bread, B-R-E-D-E. It's just the name of a place in England. Anyway, it follows the life of this monastery. The character development throughout the book is just amazing. But there's one particular sister, her name is Veronica, and she's quite the personality, and she definitely struggles both between pride and self-pity. She keeps going back and forth. And so at some point in one of the dialogues, the Mother Superior, the abbess, is speaking with one of her council members, and she asks her, is Sister Veronica better exalted or humbled? It's a very good question to ask. That is, will she respond better to God's grace and to be a gift to the community if she's going to be exalted or if she's going to be humbled? So that's, and if you want to know the answer, just read the book. So the Lord knows us individually. He knows how each of us operates. And so He knows what each of us needs to respond positively to His invitation. In the same way as clay needs heat to be hardened, whereas water needs cold to be hardened and to become ice. So depending on who we are, we might need heat or cold. And so we might need to be humbled or we might need to be exalted in order to respond better to God's grace. So just a couple of examples then. Here, for example, when Jesus is dealing with the 72 disciples, they came back after He sent them out to preach, and they come back, and here we are in somewhere in Luke. I think it's around Luke 10 or Luke 11. Luke 10, verses 17 through 20. It says, the 72 returned rejoicing and said, Lord, even the demons are subject to us because of your name. And Jesus said, so this is how Jesus responds to this moment of, I would almost call it a legitimate pride. They were proud of that and surprised that even the demons responded to them in a way that, cast out the demons. And so Jesus said, I have observed Satan fall like lightning from the sky. Behold, I have given you the power to tread upon serpents and scorpions and upon the full force of the enemy, and nothing will harm you. So clearly Jesus here with them is choosing to exalt them. So they're going to respond better by Him reinforcing what He's seen and reinforcing their success. But then He says, nevertheless, I love that line, nevertheless, do not rejoice because the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice because your names are written in heaven. So how does Jesus reel them back in? So they've gone off. Maybe their pride is a little bit, behind the driving force. And so Jesus exalts them, so meets them exactly where they are at, but then reels them back in by saying, nevertheless, brings them back to reality. Right sizes them getting a big head and brings them back down here. Self-pity. How does Jesus address that self-pity? In the examples that we used earlier, with Martha, He just calls her twice by name, Martha, Martha. Martha, Martha. Isn't that what we sometimes need? To know that we are seen and that we are loved and known and treasured and desired. And so for the Lord to take us out of that hole of wallowing in self-pity, we just need to be reassured that it's going to be okay and that we are loved and known. Or the father in the prodigal son story towards the older brother, he says, my son, everything I have is yours. Again, reiterating what he should have known, that probably he forgot. What is obvious, but he seemed to be living in a parallel reality. So he brings him back, takes him out of that hole by reminding him of what reality is. And with the man who was ill at the pool, and we're here in John 5. Yes, John 5, verses 1 through 18. 18. That's a whole story. But after Jesus asks him, "Do you want to be well?" and the sick man answers, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. While I'm on my way, someone else gets there before me." Now, what does Jesus do? Nonetheless, right there, he performs a miracle. He says, "Rise, take up your mat and walk." And immediately the man became well, took up his mat and walked. But notice what happens right after that. It was a Sabbath. So the Jews saw this man that was cured say, "It's the Sabbath, it's not lawful for you to carry your mat." Duh. Now, check out what this man answers. He says, "The man who made me well told me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" It's a very interesting way to respond to a grace you just received, which is the grace of walking after 38 years of being stuck. He's so used to blaming others for his ills and for his deficiencies that he's blaming Jesus now. It's like, "Oh, it's not my fault. That guy told me to pick up my mat and I did." And so he just encountered the Lord again. So scripture says the man who was healed did not know who it was because Jesus had slipped away. After this, Jesus found him in the temple area and said to him, "Look, you are well. Do not sin anymore so that nothing worse may happen to you." So what does the Lord do? First, he performs a miracle and he heals him. And yet then he just pulls him out of that hole of self-pity and blaming others that he has been so accustomed to by calling him back into reality, to let him see things for what they are and not for what he perceives them to be. There could be so much more that I could share, but I just wanted this meditation to be just the beginning for your own reflection. Hopefully you'll be able to spend not just a few minutes, maybe a couple of hours in the next few weeks, just going back, circling back on this theme, because I think that there's a lot that the Lord could be speaking to each of us. I spent about 10 days meditating upon this, so everything I just shared has come up from different prayer times. So I pray that the Lord will speak to you individually, so that you may be found by the Lord in those very places, whether it's the obvious pride or more the hidden type of pride of self-pity, and let the Lord encounter you there. Let the Lord bring you back to reality. Let the Lord bring you back closer to his heart, right-sizing the perception that you might have of yourself, because that's where humility is, and humility is in the present moment, and that's where grace abides. Have a good prayer time.